We tend to think we have the history of human civilization pretty well cataloged. You talk about the dawn of agriculture maybe 10,000 years ago.
Or the Sumerians inventing writing about 6,000 years ago.
Exactly. And of course, the pyramids of Egypt towering over history at, a little over 4,500 years old?
Right.
But what if all of those dates? What if they were actually modern history? What if that whole timeline we rely on, that foundational story of how we became us, is just completely wrong?
Well, today we are diving deep into a truly world-shattering discovery. It's located in the dusty plains of southeastern Turkey, near the ancient city of Urfa.
The site is Göbeklitepe.
And the dates we associate with it are, well, they're staggering. It was built at least 11,500 years ago. We're talking roughly 9,500 to 8,200 BCE.
Okay, let's just put that into perspective for you. This monumental complex, it predates the development of pottery.
It predates widespread agriculture.
And it predates Britain's Stonehenge by approximately 6 millennia.
6,000 years.
Right.
We are talking about the very end of the Ice Age.
So our sources today, and we're looking at the seminal excavation reports from the late Klaus Schmidt and the German Archaeological Institute, but also contemporary analysis and some very provocative alternative theories. They all force us to confront one central, unyielding mystery.
And that really is our mission for this deep dive, to unpack the central contradiction of Gobeklitepe.
How did purely nomadic hunter-gatherers, people without metal tools, without wheels, without permanent homes, how did they muster the organizational capacity to build something on this scale?
And what does this discovery force us to completely rewrite about the origins of complex human society?
It's a great story, too, because it's one of accidental rediscovery.
Yeah.
The site was known for decades, but it was just dismissed.
Yeah, back in the 1960s, a joint survey from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University looked at these limestone slabs scattered on a hilltop.
And what did they think?
They just concluded it was an old, abandoned medieval cemetery, deemed it irrelevant, and moved on.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because they completely missed the geological sign. They saw broken stones and thought, grave markers.
But they ignored the shape of the land they were standing on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1994 when a German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, was reading about these unusual stones in a footnote.
A footnote.
A footnote. He visits the location, and he immediately recognizes that the gently rounded hilltop, what's called a höyük, Turkish for belly hill, was just far too uniform to be natural.
He knew he was looking at an artificial mound.
He knew he was looking at a gigantic Stone Age architectural achievement of really an unprecedented scale.
And that scale is where the human element just hits you. I mean, we're not talking about small piles of rocks here.
No. We're talking about multiple circular or oval enclosures, 10 to 20 meters across, built from local limestone. But the centerpieces are these incredible T-shaped monoliths.
These are awe-inspiring. I mean, the largest pillars stand up to 16, maybe 20 feet high.
And they weigh anywhere from 7 tons to a staggering 50 tons.
50 tons? 50. And they had to be quarried miles away and then somehow transported and erected on this hill.
Let's just stop there for a moment. You mentioned no metal tools and no wheels. When you hear 50 tons, that's not just a number. That is roughly the weight of 10 fully grown African elephants.
Right.
And the builders achieved this with ropes, levers, and just sheer organized human muscle. That requires engineering, planning, and a command structure we never thought existed 11,500 years ago.
The organization required to coordinate hundreds of people, to feed them, to motivate them, to train them to use stone tools to carve such fine reliefs. I mean, that is arguably as monumental as the stones themselves.
And crucially, these T-pillars, they're not just brute stone. They are clearly intended to represent something. They're anthropomorphic.
They are. They're stylized human representations. If you look closely at the sides of the pillars, you can clearly make out carved arms, hands, and often belts and loincloth running right along the stone.
So Schmidt's idea was that these represent powerful beings, maybe ancestors or gods.
Ancestral spirits, supernatural entities, something watching over the site. That was his interpretation.
But the iconography is what truly captures the imagination. If the T-pillars are the bodies, then the exterior walls are just covered in detailed carvings. It's like a visual library of the Paleolithic world.
It is. You see the expected wild game, gazelle, boar, that kind of thing. But what really dominates are the dangerous predators.
Lions, scorpions, spiders.
Snakes, and especially vultures. It's an explosion of imagery, really unlike anything else from that time. If you look at Pillar D43, which people often call the Vulture Stone,
Right.
it has 51 distinct animals and 4 complex abstract motifs literally crowding the surface. This density is what art historians call horror vacui.
The fear of empty space.
Exactly.
That phrase, horror vacui, is so interesting. It doesn't just mean they ran out of room. It suggests a culture that felt the need to imbue every single square inch with dense, symbolic meaning.
They were trying to capture a cosmos, not just decorate a wall.
Which shows us they had this incredibly rich, symbolic world they felt compelled to document long before anyone even thought of an alphabet.
Precisely. And this is where the puzzle really deepens, because the people who created this level of symbolic and architectural complexity were, by all traditional metrics, supposed to be too busy just surviving to do any of this.
And that brings us to the revolutionary part, the absolute contradiction that is Göbekli Tepe. Traditionally, the accepted model of civilization was simple, right? Agriculture creates surplus food.
Surplus food lets people settle down permanently.
And permanent settlement allows for specialization, hierarchy, and finally, the time and organization to build massive temples.
That model, the Neolithic Revolution, it posits that the technical advance of farming preceded the social complexity.
Göbekli Tepe completely flips that script.
It just turns it on its head.
Because the builders were definitively hunter-gatherers. I mean, we're not just guessing about this, are we? The evidence is in the bone fragments.
Oh, it's hard science. Researchers examined over 100,000 bone fragments from the site. 60% of them came from wild game gazelles, wild boar, red deer.
And crucially, there are no telltale signs of a permanent settlement.
None. No typical Neolithic houses, no domestic hearths for cooking meals day after day, and absolutely zero pottery. They were gathering here, but they weren't living here permanently.
Okay, wait. If they were pure hunter-gatherers, getting hundreds of people together, the estimated manpower you'd need to hold those 50-ton pillars, that's inherently unstable.
It is.
How could they afford the time for construction and rituals without some massive pre-existing food storage system? The logistics alone should have bankrupted their entire economy.
And that is the crucial question. It's what led Klaus Schmidt to propose his radical temple-first theory. He posited that the need for complex shared ritual activity, the desire for a shared spiritual meaning and a place together, that was the organizational driver, not food security.
So the spiritual or cultural necessity came first, not the caloric one.
Exactly. The need to carve and erect these pillars and the need for large groups to assemble for rituals for days or weeks at a time, that forced these previously nomadic groups to come together and coordinate on an unprecedented scale.
So to feed the hundreds of workers gathered at the site, they had to organize the food supply.
They had to manage resources, develop systems for harvesting the wild grains that grew naturally in the region.
And that organizational pressure, that need to feed everyone, that inadvertently accelerated the process of domestication. The constant harvesting and replanting of wild grains near the temple ultimately leads to the world's first agricultural experiments.
And this is why it's so revolutionary. Gobeklitepe suggests that civilization began not with a farmer discovering a productive seed, but with a community uniting around a shared belief system. The search for meaning drove the technical revolution.
So if the stones were built to convey meaning, what exactly was that meaning? I mean, the interpretation of the iconography is just fascinating, particularly the obsession with dangerous creatures.
Well, if we look at the ritual view, the prominence of lions, scorpions, and these other menacing predators, rather than just edible prey, it suggests a profound shift in focus.
Right. It's not a menu.
No. Ian Hodder, a leading Neolithic scholar, he suggested that maybe the builders were trying to master their fears of the wild, or that the T-pillars acted as muhafizlar, as guards for the sacred space.
Schmidt himself, he leaned toward a kind of cult of the dead, didn't he?
He did. He noted fragments of human bone found in the layers of fill, suggesting the site might have been a center for a death cult or a burial ground. The location, high above the plains, was chosen so the dead could be, as he put it, looking out over a hunter's dream.
A place of endless wild game.
Exactly. And this is supported by the huge presence of vulture carvings. Archaeologists link the vulture iconography to early Neolithic sky burial practices,
where the body is left exposed and the birds.
The carrion birds transport the flesh and maybe the soul to the heavens. It implies a really sophisticated cosmological belief system about death and transition.
But there's a dramatic alternative interpretation that shifts the focus from death rituals to a global catastrophe.
Yes.
And this theory centers on Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone we mentioned, with all its complex animal carvings.
This is the controversial but captivating astronomical view. It's put forth by researchers like Martin Sweetman and Dimitros S. They argue that the animal motifs, specifically patterns like Scorpio, a duck they map to Libra, a wolf representing Canis, they argue these are not random animals or spiritual guardians.
They're constellations.
They're representing constellations. They believe the pillar is a sophisticated star map.
And if it's a star map, what are they mapping?
They calculate that these specific alignments correspond to a precise date around 10,950 BCE.
Which is a date that aligns exactly with the Younger Dryas impact event.
Yes.
Okay, we need to contextualize the Younger Dryas for you. This wasn't just a bit of bad weather. This was a catastrophic global event that rapidly plunged Earth back into near glacial conditions after a period of warming.
We're talking massive floods, widespread fires, rapid climate shifts, and mass extinctions across continents.
It was a world-changing event that profoundly destabilized early human populations.
So this interpretation suggests Gobekli Tepe might be a kind of disaster monument, a cultural memory system built using stone symbolism to record the catastrophe for future generations, ensuring the memory of that event survived even without written language.
Wow. So they weren't building a temple to worship gods. They were building a survival guide for the future, a cosmic warning.
It's a powerful idea, but whether it was a temple, a burial site, or an astronomical memory system, the story of its active use ends with the final, most unsettling mystery: the deliberate burial of the entire complex.
That's the part I find so compelling. We're talking about massive enclosures monuments that took generations of labor to build, and they were consciously and meticulously filled in.
Buried with tons of rubble and earth by human hands, they didn't just abandon it to erode, they buried it.
The sheer labor involved in reburying the T-pillars is almost as significant as the labor involved in raising them in the first place.
It suggests a profound collective decision. It absolutely wasn't carelessness.
So why? Why bury your magnum opus? Why entomb the very things that defined your culture?
Well, the theories abound. Some see it as a ritual closing, maybe a defin a proper burial ceremony to mark the end of an old belief system.
Or the death of a lineage of leaders represented by the T-pillars.
Right. Others link it directly back to that disaster theory. A symbolic act to bury the memory of the cataclysm, hoping to close that traumatic chapter of history forever.
And for all the staggering information we've uncovered, the most mind-boggling fact about Göbekli Tepe is just how little we've actually seen.
It's true, we're talking only about 5% to maybe 15% of the massive complex has been excavated so far.
So there's much more.
Oh, much more. Ground-penetrating radar and geomagnetic surveys are clear. There are at least 20, possibly as many as 42, more monumental structures perfectly preserved underground.
And some of them are bigger.
Some of these buried circles appear much larger than what we've seen, possibly up to 100 meters in diameter.
So why the agonizingly slow pace? I mean, if this site rewrites history, why aren't we digging 24/7? This seems like the most important archaeological site on Earth.
Because of something called the preservation paradox. It's a fundamental challenge in deep archaeology.
Oh, yeah.
The 12,000-year-old limestone pillars survived perfectly for millennia beneath the Earth. But the moment they are exposed to modern weather, they start to crack and decay rapidly.
So archaeology is, ironically, a destructive act.
In a way, yes. Once you uncover the stone, you make it vulnerable to thermal shock from the sun, the freeze-thaw cycles of water, air pollution, everything.
So we just dug it all up now.
We would destroy it faster than we could study it, and we would lose that perfect state of preservation. The primary strategy now is to leave the vast majority intentionally unexcavated as a reserve.
That's a powerful act of foresight. It's a decision to trust the future.
It is. The hope is that future archaeologists, maybe in 50 or 100 years, will have vastly superior, non-invasive technology.
Like what?
Think of nanosensors that can analyze materials without taking samples, or advanced MRI that can map internal structures without disturbing a single rock. We're essentially saving 90% of the site as a gift for future researchers.
And Gobekli Tepe isn't even a solitary site, is it? It's the centerpiece of something much larger.
Absolutely. We now know Gobekli Tepe is the center of a much wider cultural network known as the Stone Hills region, or Tas Tepler.
This complex includes similar sites.
Like Karahan Tepe, Sabris and Bonkuklu Tarla, with some of them, like Tepe, potentially being even older.
Which implies a vast, interconnected, highly organized civilization network that stretched across the Levant, maybe even overseas to Cyprus, long before writing or organized agriculture.
They shared ideas, rituals, engineering knowledge. The core takeaway is just undeniable. Gobekli Tepe shatters the old narrative. Profound social organization, complex engineering, spiritual urgency. It all emerged because of the shared desire for meaning.
The cultural push, not just the technical achievement of farming. It was a civilization built on shared ideas.
An immense collective effort.
And yet, we have only seen a tiny fraction of it. The site's greatest message might be the unyielding secrecy of the 36 or more buried structures that lie untouched.
It really begs the question, what if the true lesson of Göbekli Tepe isn't found in what the original builders put on the stones, but what they, and now we choose to leave buried?
Is the unexcavated 90% a generous gift for future discovery waiting for better tools?
Yeah.
Or is it a symbolic warning left by the ancient builders themselves? Maybe they understood the destructive nature of exposure, counseling patience in the face of history, telling us that true understanding takes time.